Donald Trump now having been convicted for over 34 felonies, and he's still being tried for several other cases. And remember, this is right ahead of the elections, the presidential elections that is to take place in November of this year, 2024. Now, let's get into the depths of the particular 34 felonies that we are speaking about, for which he's already been convicted yesterday. Now, former President Donald Trump has been convicted of the 34 felonies and now cannot hold public office or vote in many states. That is one of the bigger consequences that comes out from this conviction, the fact that he cannot vote in several states. Judge Juan Merchan must first approve the jury's verdict, which is typically a formality. Following this, the lawyers and prosecutors will be recommending sentences and arguments will be made at Trump's sentencing hearing. This is the entire procedure, the court procedure that we are taking you through. Despite the conviction, Trump's imprisonment is considered unlikely. Why so? Well, the maximum sentence for his crimes is 1 to 3 or 4 years in prison, but alternatives like fines or probation are more common. In some cases, home confinement or a curfew could also be imposed instead of prison time. Furthermore, Trump could be released on bail while appealing his conviction. As the situation unfolds, the impact on his 2024 presidential campaign remains to be seen. Let's in fact take a look at what Judge Juan Merchan had to say about the entire matter being in trial.
12 everyday New Yorkers, and of course our alternates, heard testimony from 22 witnesses, including former and current employees of the defendant, media executives, book publishers, custodians of records, and others. They reviewed call logs, text messages, and emails. They heard recordings. They saw checks and invoices, bank statements, and calendar appointments. This type of white-collar prosecution is core to what we do at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. In the 1930s, District Attorney Thomas Dewey ushered in the era of the modern, independent professional prosecutor. For now nearly 90 years, dedicated professionals in this office have built upon that fine tradition. A major part of our practice during that nearly 90 years has been public integrity work, including cases involving jurists, local and state electeds, public servants, and others. I want to thank this phenomenal prosecution team, embodying the finest traditions of this office: professionalism, integrity, dedication, and service. They are model public servants, and I am proud and humbled to serve side by side with them. The 12 everyday jurors vowed to make a decision based on the evidence and the law, and the evidence and the law alone. Their deliberations led them to a unanimous conclusion, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the defendant, Donald J. Trump, is guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree to conceal a scheme to corrupt the 2016 election. And while this defendant may be unlike any other in American history, we arrived at this trial and ultimately today at this verdict in the same manner as every other case that comes through the courtroom doors, by following the facts and the law and doing so without fear or favor. I want to conclude by expressing deep gratitude to the NYPD and the officers of the Office of Court Administration for securing the courthouse, all of our safety, making sure that the courthouse and all of the other matters that are important in their own right continued seamlessly. They will continue to be and have always been incredible partners.
Well, the next big question at this juncture is how can Trump be campaigning after conviction? What exactly will play out? Donald Trump is likely to appeal conviction, return to campaign trial. And the judge may restrict their travels, but he doesn't want to hinder the campaigning. Impact on Trump's campaign will hinge on sentencing as well. Daughter-in-law Lara Trump says that virtual rallies might be a possibility if he is home confined. And no campaign rally is scheduled, but fundraisers may also be expected. So this is how the rallies may play out, the election campaigning that's continuing. Because remember, as we were just discussing with Sandeep Unathan as well, that the Constitution of the United States of America doesn't deny or doesn't rule out a particular convicted felon from running from the presidential polls campaigning. It doesn't constrain them from doing so. And in fact, if elected by the voters, they can even be sworn in from the prison itself. Quite an unprecedented situation that we have been discussing about early this morning. But well, let's also take a look at the overall impact of this judgment, of this particular conviction on Donald Trump. Donald Trump's critiques in both parties generally agreed that there may not be much political fallout, although some were hopeful that the convictions would have at least a marginal impact in what will likely be called a close election between Biden and Trump. Now, as per the News9 Marist poll, most Americans are unaffected by Trump's trial outcome, with 67% saying that a guilty verdict won't change their vote and 76% unfazed by not a guilty verdict. However, a guilty verdict impacts 17% of voters negatively, especially non-whites and lower-income groups. They are less likely to support Donald Trump. Conversely, a not guilty verdict could sway young voters and minorities. Independents are less influenced, with only 11% swayed by a guilty verdict. So it's also a morality that is coming into question. It's a moral dilemma for the voters out there, and it only seems that the majority of the voters seem to be unfazed by this particular verdict coming in, because for them, Donald Trump has something to offer which Joe Biden hasn't been able to over the last 5 years of his term, as the voters that we were just listening to earlier in the bulletin. Now, after being convicted of a felony, questions arise around what rights will Donald Trump have and not have as likely presidential nominee and felon as well. What are the rights that Trump could lose at this point? Let's first focus on that. Right to vote in Florida if imprisoned. He is likely to be eligibility to serve on jury, could be temporarily revoked as well. He may also lose his right to own firearm under the federal law. May face potential fines up to $5,000 per felony account. And that is 34 felony counts that we have till now. He's still under trial for several other cases that are far more serious and far more concerning at this point for a presidential candidate, especially because this is history being created, as we are mentioning again and again, in the United States of America.